Welcome to a special episode of the Indian Community podcast, where today's guest is none other than Brendan Rogers. Brendan is one of the greatest cheerleaders of Brand India and also a key player in the Indian startup ecosystem. He's the co-founder of 2AM VC. His company, 2AM VC, is a sector-agnostic, Gen Z-centric, and India-only early-stage venture fund. Brendan has not only invested in the country's potential, but has also actively contributed to the growth and success of numerous Indian startups. In fact, his previous venture, WAG, which became the largest pet platform in the US and is also listed on NASDAQ under PET, is a classic example of his business acumen. His expertise and insights are globally recognized, making him a sought-after advisor, mentor, and speaker at major startup conferences and on top industry podcasts. Today, Brendan joins us to share his experiences, his vision for India's entrepreneurial landscape, and his unwavering belief in the potential of Indian startups. So let's dive into an inspiring conversation with Brendan Rogers. Hey, Brendan, namaste to the Indian Community podcast. I'm so delighted to see you here.
Thank you so much for having me, and namaste to yourself.
Namaste, welcome.
Great. So let's get started, Brendan. Brendan, can you share what has been your journey and what led you to co-found 2AM VC? What is that inspired you to focus specifically on the Indian startup ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great introductory question. Yeah, so my India journey really began in 2019. I spent about 9 years as a founder, and historically, I've worked with amazing engineers and product managers, etc., from India in Silicon Valley. So I had that early relationship on the technical front. But in 2019, I made my first trip to India. I met an individual by the name of Herschel Mehta, and Herschel was investing out of his family office in Indian and US startups. And we met in California, and he was telling me about his Indian investments and how India was growing exponentially in many different sectors. And he mentioned that his cousin, Sanjay Mehta, started an accelerator called 100x.vc, which is the largest pre-seed accelerator in India today. And I was asked to go to the first demo day at IIT Bombay in 2019. One random morning, I got an email from Herschel inviting me to the demo day. Something inside of me was telling me that I should go. It was really my intuition, my gut feeling. I make all my decisions in my life with my gut. And about 2 weeks later, I was on a plane headed to Mumbai. But I was always been fascinated about emerging markets, and India was always on the top of my list, hence working, like I mentioned, with great Indian developers, etc. But that really sparked my interest. So I got on a plane and I landed in Mumbai in December of 2019.
That is right. Brandon, what key qualities you look for when you decide to invest in a certain company, specifically Indian companies?
When I evaluate like a specific market in India specifically, I first and foremost, I do a lot of research. I read a lot. I have built out my network with other investors, other tech executives and founders. And really by building my network, I get to learn a lot and I see a lot of deals which allow me to learn about new markets and markets I may not be super familiar with. And first and foremost, we look at businesses that are really attracting like large TAMs that are tackling like just massive markets that are ripe for disruption, where there's massive pain points that are currently Indians are facing, and we look for businesses that are solving those massive pain points in large TAMs. And as the economy grows and as consume more and as there's more liquidity within the markets,
Mhm.
there's just more opportunity to innovate in specific sectors. We really do a ton of research and really lean on our network to find specific markets and niches that are ripe for disruption. When it comes to founders specifically, we really look for founders that have that hungry, passionate, no, I'm put on this earth to build this business because of this reason mentality. And you can sniff that out very early on based on what has this founder done without capital? What little resources has this individual have? What was the outcome with that? Have they built previous businesses that might have failed, but they were able to get something live and get some traction? Have they been able to work at a startup and seen something go from 0 to 1 as an employee and have really seen that growth? And have they been able to really bring people around an idea that allow other people to get very passionate and get behind the idea, et cetera? So those are some of the ways we look at markets, and those are some of the ways how we, from a high level, diligence founders.
I'm sure this will help a lot to our viewers, the aspiring entrepreneurs and startup owners. It'll help them a lot align themselves and understand what are the real qualities the investor looks in for. Thank you so much.
Right. Brendan, you mentioned your association with India started in 2019. So I wanted to understand what was your perception about India before you got to IIT Mumbai for the first time. And now that you spend so much of time in India, how has your perception changed, if it has, or you still think what you used to think about India?
So that's a great question. So when my initial thoughts of India, because I wasn't well traveled when I obviously was building my previous startups, I thought of India as, from a technical perspective, just like a large IT hub, which frankly, like it was, that's like India 1.0, I would say, from a tech perspective. But India to me was a place where I knew that there was like really good technical talent and almost like a country that was developing, and I didn't really know the pace of what it was developing in. I didn't know how large the economy is and how and what it could be. To be honest with you, I just thought of India as a place that had really good technical talent, and I, from a non-technical perspective, like I was always drawn to the culture, whether it's the food, the music, just the whole, like, even like the gods and the Hindi writing. It just was I'm very drawn to that. But I didn't really think much about it. And then really what was interesting to me, which kind of when the light bulb went off to think more of India, was when funds like Tiger Global and some of these larger growth funds like SoftBank, et cetera, they started investing hundreds of millions of dollars into Indian startups, Flipkart and Oyo, and that got me thinking like, wow, these large international investors were really starting to deploy heavily into India. And then like on a side note, I think if you look at China in the mid 2000s and early 2000s, they had a massive technologically technical, like, really run up, and a lot of like pain points were solved in China. And I think that similar trend lines are happening in India today. That was like my perspective. But when I got to India, man, like it was like I felt like I was in Palo Alto. Like when I was at IIT Bombay and I was talking to these founders, the sheer technical expertise and passion, and you don't need that much capital in India to start a business. It just felt like I was back in Palo Alto again. Yeah.
Right.
That is excellent. And have you heard of the term Jugaad?
Yeah. Well, yes, I have, but I have, yeah, but I don't wanna is it Jugaad or Jugat?
Yeah.
God,
However you may
it's
might pronounce it means the same.
yeah, we
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, and I is it when things are all over the place?
No, it means
uh,
workaround.
It means what?
It
it means workaround, right? It's being really smart with the resources that you have and still building and solving problems with your limited resources. And this is something that is famously attributed to a lot of Indian entrepreneurs. Back in the day, there was this whole notion of people looking at Jugaad as a concept of being able to go out, build products by making or leveraging whatever little that they had. And the reason I asked you this is because you mentioned about how you looked at the early entrepreneur and how much were they able to achieve with whatever little that they had, and how much did they invest in terms of time and effort into their ventures. Jugaad has a lot of different connotations, and one of them is, of course, about making sure that you're using your resources to the best of their capacity.
Yeah, I understood. Yeah, because when like you walk on the streets and like wires everywhere, but they're like all compacted on the trees and stuff.
correct.
That's like a workaround. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I've heard that a few times. But yeah, I mean, I think there's that mindset and that notion is something that I think really caters to the startup culture, right? Yeah, it was absolutely fascinating, and I think that what is really interesting about India, specifically around founders, is like I mentioned, like you don't need to have that much capital to get something off the ground. And typically,
Mhm.
most founders are engineers or have some level of engineering background where they can write code. Where, like in the US, there's founders that like need to go hire out engineers and pay money to find engineers and all this stuff. Where in tech, if you're already have a founding team that is engineers, you can move that much faster. And obviously, startups is all about speed at the earliest stages. So, yeah, it's fascinating.
Correct. It's all about the whole frugal innovation mindset, right? How you can innovate faster, be better, and ship out products at a rapid pace. So that's the
Mhm.
mindset that I was talking about. I'm sure you'll meet a lot of young talent who is literally doing Jugaad in one way or the other.
So, Brandon,
Great.
today in 2024, what are the top five things you would say that make India a very hot investment destination for investors?
Yeah, I think innovation is growing rapidly within India. And I talk a lot about this publicly, but one word that I'm very obsessed with is consumption, because I think consumption in India is growing exponentially,
Mhm.
not just in tier one, but in Bharat as well.
Mhm.
And I think consumption in Bharat is growing, but I think premium consumption as well is growing in tier one India.
Mhm.
And as if we go back to Bharat, if you think of individuals being able to have, being upskilled and having higher pay jobs, which allows more liquidity and stuff like that and more free cash flow, more consumption will occur. And I think so consumption, and then also like manufacturing as well, where you have these companies entering India, partnering with local manufacturing plants and whatnot, being able to offer more jobs at a little bit higher pay, whatever the case may be, consumption will grow from that perspective. So I think that is, I think so consumption, I think manufacturing,
Mhm.
I think transportation and logistics. You're seeing all of these new bullet trains, you're seeing like the Indian corridor, you're seeing like the ability to move goods very fast and very timely, efficient manners. Also, just getting around India from a transportation perspective is allowing people to travel more, and I think that travel domestically is something that is growing exponentially in India, and those are just another market that I think international investors will look at. And with that, you have sub groups of travel, whether if that's products for travel or software for travel, whatever it is. But you're seeing like these new trains being built. You're seeing obviously these there's airports popping up left and right in India, and new terminals. Indigo and these airlines are having like way more destinations, more nonstop flights. So travel airfare, I feel like is reasonably priced.
Yes.
So I think that is something that is this new market that's emerging. I think obviously the digitization of within Aadhaar and UPI and now ONDC. I think as the government kind of rolls out more technology and make the Indian experience personally more frictionless, I think that will allow more businesses to grow and thrive. And that's a whole new wave of businesses that are being started that is attracting more outside capital. I think even import export as well. I think there's a level of obviously we talked about it with consumption. India is known for being a consumption heavy country. And I think with that, with more manufacturing coming into India, I think that there's an opportunity to be more of a have more manufacturing, more export goods, et cetera. 20% of all Apple iPhones are now made in India. I think that's amazing. And I think all of these kind of high level sectors are allowing investors to see that there is growth happening in all different sectors and the economy is growing and the government is really behind the growth. Also think if you speak to more investors that have more of a pulse on India, they also look at this Gen Z population and realize that Gen Z Indians have they are more free population of individual where they're taking more risk, and I think that allows for more innovation and just more growth. And what I mean by that is I invest in founders that are 19, 20, 21 years old. Some of them have even dropped out of college. I know Bits Pilani, they have a program where if you drop out, you can come back and they'll fund you. And it's like families now are more kind of receptive of this risk-free Gen Zer. Now you see Gen Z with taking out credit cards and like all of this stuff. So I think that sheer population is something that is going to be massive and that is going to really just grow all these other sectors exponentially. So those are some of the reasons why I think international investors that are doing diligence on India, I think they're looking at those like bullet points as this is an area that is growing. There is a lot of growth and positivity. So if we're looking at an emerging market, this is the place that we should put our chips down.
Any areas that you think need more attention even now?
I think that maybe not more attention, but I think what's really interesting, which I did not enter India thinking I was gonna invest in brand or D2C companies. That's not my forte, nor was I really focusing on that. But what's interesting, what I realized in India is that there's a lot of markets with large TAMs that have products. Let's just take the beauty industry or the shampoo industry, where there's these old legacy companies that are massive, and a lot of people buy on Flipkart, whatever,
Right.
but there isn't any, like, craft, brand loyalty, more, let's just say, example, beauty, like, chemical free, where people feel connected to the brand and they wanna grow with the brand. It's more so what's the cheapest shampoo or something. And I think now you're seeing brands emerge that have large TAMs that are now connecting with the Indian consumer, that is allowing the Indian consumer to have more stickiness with the brand. And I think shampoo, like toothpaste, things of that nature, I think these D2C companies, there's some areas that are, I think, very interesting. And I think that the last couple of years, people weren't really focusing on D2C and specific brands with large TAMs. But I think now that there's companies that are launching or that have launched in, let's just say, the women's athleisure wear. That's a space that is really growing, and historically women want to wear athleisure wear and not just ethnic wear or what have you. And I think that sectors like that, specifically around D2C, should get more attention, and I think they are to some degree. And then let's see. I also think that there's a so I this is and I know I've never publicly said this, but I think that real estate is something that's really interesting in India, but more so around like rentals and apartments. I think that as more people move into these tier one cities in India, there's this kind of, it's hard to find an apartment and get approval, and you have to pay a few months in security deposit, and the landlord has to like you, and then you have to find roommates, and there's a lot of challenges. And I think that market is really interesting as real estate and rentals get more expensive. So I think that maybe that industry, I think, is maybe not as looked upon as much, that I'm currently looking at, I think is very fascinating. And then lastly, I'm not in the weeds with cyber or space tech or deep tech, which I think there's fewer deals in India. However, there are amazing founders building in those spaces. I don't think that those deals, I just don't see that many of those sectors. And that's something that I would like to see more of, because I think that those industries are definitely growing and some amazing founders are building in those spaces. So I think those sectors could use more attention as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, Brendan, I think the whole consumer goods category, like you rightly mentioned, there's this fight for attention and loyalty, which every major brand is facing and across markets, right? And India is also, of course, uniquely positioned in that sense because there's also distribution and availability that's going to be important because of the size and the scale of the country. That is a unique challenge for even established brands. I noticed you had a picture outside of Forest Essentials, and that's an interesting brand that's coming up in that category, especially in the wellness and herbal. There's another brand that we are familiar with. It's called Ritvi, that's based out of New York. The founder is actually in New York, and she's trying to build a wellness brand from here in the US. But again, her focus is to serve the needs of people who understand Ayurveda as a principle and the science behind herbal products. So I think that that category is ready to explode very soon. You'll see a lot of traction. Space tech, There's definitely a lot of work happening in that category again. A lot of that is also managed or closely managed, I would say, by the public sector initiatives of the government, right? So there's a lot of active investment in that space with all the numerous satellites that the government launches. So I think that's also a sector which is pretty hot. Real estate, I did find you mentioned that, and that is an interesting problem. Hopefully somebody's listening to this and thinking, okay, that's a great
Mhm.
problem to solve, because
Right.
that's a typical issue that you would see with, especially with younger talent who are moving from tier 2 to tier 1 in search of jobs and opportunities, or even for studies and higher education. That's a classical problem. I faced it 20 years ago when I was a student and living in Bangalore, and I used to face the same challenges. So I'm sure that's definitely a good problem to solve for a lot of. So it's a pretty large TAM, if I may say so.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think that I even like on the real estate side, like in terms of purchasing, like I'm seeing a more what's really interesting, and this may be off topic, but I've met a lot of either NRIs that are in the US or folks that were born and raised in America that are now looking actually at buying properties in India. Like it and I have no history. I know nothing about the real estate kind of market from a purchasing land perspective. But yeah, that's something that I've talked to a few people recently, and they're very excited about that. Also, like building a home, correct me if I'm wrong here, you guys would know way better than me. But like I heard that like, building a home in India can take like a very long time. And I don't know exactly, I can guess why, but I think even in that space, like even from building the house and also like within the home like DIY in the house. I think that's really interesting as well
Catching
too.
up.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's
Yes.
just a very interesting space.
Yeah. I feel the whole build of the house takes longer is because of the building styles, right? Out here in the States, the construction is very different, or the construction methodology is very different. There's not much use of bricks and cement and stone and those kind of materials, right? The frame is pretty much wood, and then there are dry walls that cover up, and then there's a final coat of bricks on the outsides. It's very different in India. So there's a focus on foundation, and cement is used pretty heavily. Nowadays,
Mm.
modern builders are deploying newer products, or let's say replicating the same accelerated building styles. But
Right.
traditional builds, if I was to go back home and build something, I would be building something using cement, because those are built to last a lifetime. Lesser expenses in terms of maintenance. So that, of course, is an area which is governed by traditional building standards. And also it varies depending on which part of India, because the geography is diverse, right? So if you were living in the southern side of the country, they have slightly different building practices than what you would see in the northeast versus something on the east. So there's very different approaches towards building homes in India.
Interesting.
I think the common trait that you would notice with all of them would be that everything is built to last 50 or 100 years, right? So if it's going to last less than that, then people are not interested in.
So the DI in from within the homes, like for example, we live in cities, those who live in tier one cities. So most of the people now live in apartments or are moving to apartments. Generally, an apartment in India is semi-furnished. Furnished DIY things are giving a lot of DIY stuff is available for you to just pick and install, pick and install. So India is in that stage at the moment, not building the houses per se, but at
I
least
see.
renovation is DIY renovation is starting, flooring thing and all those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
Very
the
interesting.
yeah.
Because traditional furniture would be where a carpenter would actually park himself
Yes.
inside your house for a week or a month even, and build everything from scratch, right?
Wow. That's crazy.
It happens.
So
It happens even now.
Wow.
when we were growing up, we would always see if a bed is being made, or let's say a sofa has to be built, would be built from scratch inside your house. And the carpenter would come to you every day and make some progress. But now, of
Wow.
course, with all this DIY furniture coming in, people in the tier one cities, of course, opting for that because they don't have the time
Right.
to let that carpenter work inside their homes for that long. So
Yes.
that's definitely a culture that's picking up. Brendan,
Yeah.
I'll move on to a question around what are the common challenges that you see with these young entrepreneurs that you meet every day? And how do you guide them so that they're able to navigate across?
Yeah, I think a common theme that I've seen more than not is there's two things. I think the first thing is when founders, if they're first time founders and they're raising like a pre-seed and they may have a little bit of traction or they haven't launched yet, but they have really good backgrounds. They're not thinking like big enough. They're thinking not with they're thinking like within the next year or two and not thinking, okay, if this could be $1 billion business in 5 years or 4 years. Some founders, they feel like they're if they say things of that nature, then like investors may be like, oh, this is crazy. This is not like they have no idea what they're talking about. But there's a fine line of sharing how large a TAM is, sharing how large of a pain point there is, and then sharing how your technology is really solving this and how this can reach millions of people or customers that will consistently pay over time or month after month. And if you do the math, like these are massive businesses, and I think founders sometimes don't give themselves enough credit and also think that you're raising if you're coming like if I'm doing a $500,000 round, in their mind they should be like, "Oh, I'm gonna try to go raise a Series A in the next 12 months, and a Series A is 5 million, 8 million, $10 million." That's the thinking. That's the growth. So I feel like some founders lack that until they build a little more confidence within themselves, and sometimes they don't do that, and typically, like, we don't invest, but there are founders that are like, "Wow, like, actually, this makes sense, like, we can this if we execute on these milestones, like, this we can get to that next step." So we really help the founder get to that next step. And then also around finances as well is when some founders will raise the money, and then when they have the money, they won't spend the money. And I'll get emails saying that they have updates saying, "Oh, we have 53 months of runway," or something. And you're like, "That's great that you're not just spending your money on BS, but you have to be able to strategically deploy the money and grow the business, make the right hires, take chances, take risk." So we really help our founders say, we funded you for a reason to spend the money in appropriate ways so you can grow the business. You can understand who your customers are. You can build software and hire great people to be able to scale this business. So sometimes I see founders hold on to the capital like we may not ever raise again. And that's not a good mindset to have.
Saving is an Indian
I
DNA.
know, it makes which makes sense,
Yeah.
which is great because in the US, I've seen founders just completely waste capital on things that are not necessary, but I do think that there's a happy medium where you should be frugal, but you should also spend to be able to grow the business because at the earliest stages, the secret is to move as fast as possible and try to get to 0 to 1 as fast as possible, and you have to sprint and you have to just throw things against the wall, make educated decisions, speak to your customers, listen to your customers, iterate, and move fast. And then the third thing I'll say is that, which we don't really, I can diligence this particular thought of a founder fairly well, but sometimes after I invest, it comes back, and that is not going live in a timely manner. And what I mean by that is founders are very product obsessed where they believe that it's not good enough to put in the world.
Right.
Like they have to add more features. It's not right. And this is their baby. So they're holding on to their baby and they're like, no, it's not ready. It's not ready. And it's not ready. And they're going on this vicious cycle of never going live. And as you go down that path, you're spending more money, your runway is getting shorter, there's competitors, and some founders so you can diligence that I think most people can diligence that well before the investment, or at least most investors, but sometimes there's founders that they will go live and maybe it wasn't the response that they wanted, so then they get kind of anxiety or cold feet, or they feel like that everything has to be perfect for the next big push that they do and the next big build, and that just prolongs and prolongs. really helping founders from that perspective, saying, not everything's gonna be perfect. You have to go live. You have to speak to your customers. You have to iterate, and you have to just keep just sharpening that knife until you get to PM fit.
That reminds me, in the product world, I'm a product manager by profession. And we always go back to our teams, our product owners, the developers, the designers, is chase progress and not perfection. So we have to continuously be chasing progress and shipping out things, learning. You fail fast, you ship it out, get feedback, and then iterate and continuously iterate, right? And it does come a time when sometimes you end up chasing that squirrel, and the squirrel takes you on a mad run across forest, and then you realize, okay, you're still back to ground zero because you haven't made that progress, or it's too late, the ship has sailed now. Yeah, it is interesting that you're also suggesting this, and when it comes from you, I think a lot of people will take it more seriously.
I hope so. Yeah.
That's right. One
Right.
thing that I noticed, Bharat,
Yeah.
and you mentioned it in a very different context, right? So when you said there was India in one way, and then there was Bharat. Now, what I'm trying to get to is, do you think these are two different things? Is that how you're interpreting it, or Bharat a bigger thing in your mind?
I think to me, and when I say that, it's like the new India, but more so like in India that's not Delhi, Mumbai, or Bangalore. We're talking like tier two, tier three, tier four India, where most of the population in India live.
Mm.
And that's the new India. That's how
Mhm.
I'm interpreting it. And at
Love
least
that.
that's what I've been told. Is that pretty accurate or
I would say so, yes, because that truly takes it as diverse as it can be, as scalable as it can be, right? And typically, when people think about India, they're thinking about it from the lenses of these tier one cities. But the moment you talk Bharat, you're actually going down to the grassroots. There was a very famous book that I used to love reading while growing up it was called The Prophet at the Bottom of the Pyramid.
Hmm.
Okay. And this was all about Bharat and how all these large brands and especially consumer goods, how they established themselves in India by focusing on Bharat. Of course, he doesn't mention it as Bharat, but you'll see the same flavors in that beautiful book.
the profit at the what is it again?
It's called The Prophet at the Bottom of the Pyramid.
I'll have to read that. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so I think that that is an area where there's so much innovation, there's so much talent. There's a whole I think that's the next 30 years and beyond. I think that's where growth is going to exponentially grow, and I think that's really what's going to push India to be this massive superpower.
Any two, three, any couple of tier two or tier three cities you would like to name where you have actually seen buzzing and progress happening the way you want to?
I don't know if I should I don't know if these are tier 2 cities. Like would you consider indoor tier 2?
Yeah,
Yeah, not really.
but it's not Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore, of course. But it's not even,
Eh,
yeah, we cannot call it exactly tier two, but it's less common.
maybe Ranchi? How about Ranchi?
Okay.
So we invested in a company called AppTheMart,
Hmm.
and AppTheMart is run by 2 wonderful founders. They used to work at Lenskart,
Hmm.
and they started they're from I believe Abhishek's from Ranchi. I could be wrong, but I believe he is. And what they do is they go to Kiranas, and they basically go to the Kirana store owner, and they turn their Kiranas into AppTheMarts, but what they give them is delivery options. They give them like backend or CRM management software. They even speak to manufacturers, etcetera. So it's basically the OYO model for Kiranas, and they started and it's only for tier 2 and tier 3 Indian cities. The amount of innovation that they've done in this space has just been exponential. So I think that Ranchi specifically is an area that is a place that is at least Aptamart is completely disrupted.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I haven't been to too many places, to be honest with you. There is so many places, and I will not even say some of them because I won't be able to pronounce the names properly, but there is so many places. There's a few places in UP I really wanna go to. Obviously, I really wanna go I'm a spiritual person, so obviously the spiritual places, like, obviously Cash and Varanasi and all these places. And then obviously down south in Kerala, we have a few founders building in Kerala, to be honest with you. And obviously would wanna go to Amritsar for the food and stuff like that, and I heard there's a really cool place called I don't know if we talked about this when we first chatted, guys, but Have you ever heard of a place called it's called Sukhum or Sukhum? It's in UP. Yes, have you heard of this?
Nope.
So it's like a very rural place within India,
Mhm.
and it's in UP, and I heard it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's like, places like that, I just feel like I have not experienced India
Mhm.
from the lens of these really small, beautiful, spiritual cities and stuff like that. I'm excited. My next trip when I go, I'm gonna be going in a few months, and I just got back from a really long trip, but hopefully I'll be able to go to some of these places and not really be on my laptop and my phone, but really just like, immerse myself in these cultures. And like I said earlier, now Indigo, if you actually look at Indigo and see how many airports these airline company flies to,
Right.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe I'll just get on a plane and just go, and then obviously, like, I've never been to Ahmedabad. I think we talked about this
Yeah.
before when we last chatted, but no, I mean, I talked to a lot of founders now building at Ahmedabad, and obviously with the whole rise of Gift City, et cetera, I think that's another area that's, like, really growing, and I'm very grateful and excited to go visit Ahmedabad. There's a lot of, like, startup, like, events and conferences and stuff like that happen there, so I think that area is, like, really growing. To be honest with you, Pune is also a place, obviously, that's right next to Mumbai, it's just a quick ride.
Mhm.
You have a lot of SaaS companies that have been very successful that have been built in Pune, and now there's founders that are starting their own businesses that used to work at some of these companies like First Cry, Elastic Run, et
Mhm.
cetera.
Mhm.
So excited about that area, and yeah, there's a lot of startup hubs just, like, popping up, and I think talent is starting to emerge in some of these areas. I do think, though, however, a lot obviously, as you guys know, like, talent is really going to Bangalore, Gurgaon, 'cause there's that's where all, like, the bigger companies are, and
Right.
I'm assuming more money is to be made there from a salary perspective. But yeah, a lot of growth.
That's true. Brendan, I stand corrected. I looked it up. It was the book is actually called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. Uh,
Okay,
yeah.
wonderful.
I got the latter part of the name correct, and the author is C.K. Prahlad. It's a beautiful
Okay,
book.
cool.
I think it came out in 2004, but
Oh, nice.
it talks exactly about Bharat in the same sense as you were thinking. I would recommend
Wow,
you to pick it up.
I will. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, Brendan, talking about 2 a.m. VC, what are your long term goals for your fund? And where do you think your fund is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So right now, it's Herschel and I are the co-Ps of the fund. We have an associate that we hired this year or last year. He splits his time between Mumbai and Bangalore. He's a Gen Zer and he's a rock star. And we have a head of compliance that without him, none of this would be possible, and he allows us to really invest in Indian domiciled businesses, really get underneath the hood with diligence from like a founder perspective and term sheet perspective, and really has allowed us to be able to scale as we invest in more companies at a more rapid pace. And then we have a venture partner that's based in Mumbai and Bangalore as well. And we also have something called the 2 a.m. Army, and these are Gen Zers that basically are eyes and ears as well at universities, whether if it's the IITs or the BIS the IAMs, whatever it is. And really just we're in conversation weekly where we talk about deals, they source deals, and they're almost like a venture partner, if you will. So that's the team makeup now. In 5 to 10 years, so we're raising the second fund, and the first fund was $10 million. We're still deploying out of fund 1, but we had a lot of interest for fund 2, so we went to market recently for fund 2. Fund 2 will be $25 million.
Mm.
But 5 to 10 years, I see 2AM probably adding maybe 1 to 2 other GPs and having a f maybe close to maybe 200 million under management, and maybe a little bit more, to be honest with you. I think that as the I think right now, fund size and where the economy is and where the market is and where the stage we play at is correct. I think it will give us a lot of opportunity to multiply the fund over and over again. And I think as the market scales and as the economy scales, we'll be able to raise larger funds and really bring in institutions and folks of that nature to be able to write larger checks and checks more frequently. But that's the goal. I wake up every day grateful that I get to invest in companies that are solving massive pain points for the largest country in the world, and also founders building in India solving pain points for people in the US and abroad. We also have a really strong thesis of build in India and sell into the US or sell into Europe or Asia, whatever the case may be. So I'm very grateful for that. And I took a huge chance with really just like saying, you know what? I really believe in this market and I think that this market is going to be massive and clearly it's growing and it's exciting and just the amount of support and acceptance that I've received is I'm just so grateful that I get respected and I'm not looked at as like a tourist investor, like I'm just here to make money and then I'm leaving. I truly want to invest in India for as long as I can. And I have a great team behind me and I have a great co-founder and his families have had a lot of success in India over the last 10, 15 years. And I think we're just really getting started. It's funny because when I first started really branding myself and doing podcasts and conferences and stuff, and I had a lot of people from India reach out to me and be like, why are you doing this? And in India. And then the next step was like, I had a lot of people in the US and in Europe say, why are you doing this? What is like the appeal? And like, the reason is because there's just not the education. I think that at the earliest stages, there a lot of people are just curious on like what sectors are you seeing? What do you look for in founders? Why are the founders different? Why they're all going to Silicon Valley? Why are they moving back to India? And then the third iteration that I think really helped or that really started to take off in 2023 was I had a lot of people that were non-Indians reach out to me and be like, "Oh wow, I'm really interested in India. I've read the Bain Capital reports. I've read the Ernst& Young reports. I see Apple manufacturing now in India at a larger pace. I see Tesla coming into India. What's going on here? What is people love? Obviously, a lot of people are very positive on the PM and stuff like that. And I'm just was very accepted. Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. That's why I see the fund and it's just a lot of fun. I know you guys are from India, you guys live in India, but for me, man, it's fun. You go to India and you sit in a rickshaw and you just are in like it's another world. It's just fun. And I feel like if you live in America, and I love America, I'm very grateful to be American. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that this country has given me, and I'll always be grateful. But there's some times when I'm in America and I'm like, "Man, like, I don't maybe it's just me, but I'm just like, this is boring." I don't know. Go to India and you see everything, and it's just like the stimulation is just like you're always on, and I think that's very special, and I think that for someone like me that has never really been in environments like that, it's exciting, it's an adventure, and someone like me is I love the adventure. I have this Sanskrit tattoo on my arm and basically what it says is every step of the journey is the journey.
Journey.
And my journey in India has been absolutely a blessing and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. So I'm just grateful to be able to invest and have given me their hard-earned money to invest in the best founders in the world. And I plan on doing that for as long as I can.
That
Great.
is fantastic, Brendan. Has anybody ever called you Brendan Bhai?
You're hilarious. No, that's so funny. I no, but I Herschel's cousin Sanjay's, I call him Sanjay
Sanjay
Bhai,
Bhai?
but yeah, no, they have not. That's funny. I was actually just at it's funny. I no disrespect to your guys' names, but I like the name Bala, and it's funny because there's a bald guy, I think he's an actor, and his name's
Bala.
Bala.
No.
Yeah.
And the
Uh,
song name is Bala. The movie name is Bala. Actor is Akshay
oh, there's
Kumar.
a bald guy, but
Actor is Akshay
I like
Kumar.
that.
There's a song.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, yeah, but, no, it's funny because Herschel, my co-founder, just got married, and I met you know how they all of his family members, right? So it's the is it Masi and Kaka, and
Right.
it's just like the remember everything is challenging. The culture is awesome, man. I don't know if anyone who's listening, I don't know if everyone's doesn't travel a lot, but I would say one thing that I recommend anybody, like I have a lot of young people reach out to me, they're like, what should I do? I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And it's just if you have a job or if you have a part-time job, save a little bit of money, like just be a little bit lean and go buy a plane ticket and go travel to a culture that like is completely foreign to you and where you grew up in. And for me, that was India. I couldn't have gotten farther away from what I grew up in of what India is. And like to be able to have these conversations and to be in a culture that is just so foreign, it's like when you and I felt don't get me wrong, when I went to India the first time, I felt uncomfortable. Like I was like this is overwhelming. However, I was so uncomfortable that I grew and it allowed me to be like, wow, like this experience is like eye opening. It's electrifying. I'm excited. And being uncomfortable allowed me to grow. So I encourage everybody to go somewhere where you're really excited about or you always wanted to go, and a place where there's totally different culture, and ask questions and learn and be curious. Yeah, man. And I think everybody in life should do two things. They should work at a restaurant and go to India because there's a lot of moving parts in both.
I think I've done both of them, so that checks off my bucket list. Brendan, thank you so much. We're going to dive into our rapid fire questions. These are supposedly fun
Oh,
questions. Hopefully, you'll find them fun too. I'll start
oh.
off with the first one. Do you have a hidden talent or a hobby that most people don't know about?
My a hidden talent. So I love like sports or I like being active and working out and stuff. My hobbies is I like to run, and I've completed a few ultra marathons in my past, which is pretty crazy, but it gets me excited and I like the challenge. So not many people know that about me. That I just like to be active and run and release the endorphins and stuff like that. So it's something that I like to do on a daily basis.
I've seen your video on those monkey bars in India.
Yeah, I put that on LinkedIn. That was crazy, man. That was nuts. That was nuts. That was actually really cool because that was near I did another photo. What's that famous guy's name? That the famous actor in Hollywood or Bollywood?
Shah Rukh Khan, you
Uh
were outside his
yeah, yeah,
house, right?
yeah. So you know his house?
Mannat,
Have you been to his house?
yes.
Yeah, so I don't know where that is in Mumbai.
It's Bandra.
Yeah, yeah, it's in Bandra, exactly. So there was, like, these, like, outdoor fitness monkey bar thingies, and these guys were working out, and they're all jacked, and, they were like, "Hey, man, come here. Do you, like, I don't know, do you work out?" And I was like, "Yeah, I like to do it," and, yeah, we were just working out, but those guys were a lot stronger than me, but it was a lot of fun. That was actually a really cool that's a really nice area of Mumbai, by the way.
Correct.
Very nice.
That is true. In fact, your LinkedIn is always on fire. So I've always seen everything that you post get you tremendous traction and engagement. So that's definitely great. And I think all the content that you post out there is really fun too. Rahul, I caught Brendan's profile when I saw him post Happy Republic Day with his picture of Holi. And I asked him, it's Republic Day and you're posting a Holi picture. And he loved that picture. But that's a beautiful picture. So I'm going to try and get our editors to add that picture over here because
You
I really
should.
love that picture.
Yeah, that was good. That was a Holi is a really fun time. I did it in a really cool society where I had no idea
What to expect.
what I was getting myself into, and what's crazy is that the next day I was leaving, and so I'm bald, obviously, and the dye doesn't come out for a few days. So I had a stopover in, I don't know if it was Dubai or no, it wasn't Dubai. It was like Germany or something. And I had it all on my head still, and people were like looking at me like, "What is this? Who is this? What's wrong with this man? Is he bleeding?" Blah blah blah. But that was a lot of fun. I would probably say that like I've done some like cool festivals and stuff. That I would say so where I did it was, like it was in Gokulpur in
Mumbai.
Mumbai, which is I don't you guys, you know where that is.
Mhm.
But there was, like, a DJ, and it was, like, the music I love Indian music, like, I'm obsessed, and it was, like, the music, it was just, like, it was like a outdoor nightclub,
Mhm.
but it was, like, all ages. Yeah, I'm excited for the next one for sure.
And were you served the bhang?
No, I don't know if I'm not I've never been I'm very spiritual, but I just haven't experimented. I have friends that have. I have founders' parents that are in their 70s and 80s that partake every single year. I have not done that. I don't know if I would. I think that may be something that would have to be called to, right place, right time, but, no, I have not. Have you guys partake?
So I think it's very commonly served during Holi, right? So especially when
Yeah.
people are celebrating, and that's the only time of the year when you'll find it most widespread consumed. So I think the TAM for Bang is pretty high during Holi and Mahashivratri, right? So those are two festivals when you can see them being served. I'll move on to my next question is what's the most adventurous thing on your bucket list that you're yet to check off?
Wow, that's a great question. Adventurous? I would say for me, adventurous. What would be the most adventurous thing? That's a really interesting question because I love to travel. I think travel to me is something that I didn't know I would really like until I actually really went to India for the first time, to be honest with you. I wouldn't say there's things on my bucket list that aren't really I wanna go, this is from a celebratory perspective, it's more so challenges/things slash things that I would like to do while I'm on this earth, and one of them would be, like, if we're talking about India, and I'm gonna probably say this wrong, but, Vipassana.
Mhm.
Pasana.
So I would like to do that, and I think that I like to do really hard for me at least, I like to do things that challenge me, and that's something that I'm enjoying more because I feel as I do things that challenge me, I think differently or I feel like I'm growing, and I've had this kind of the last 6 months have been a big growth spurt for me, and I really enjoy that, so for me, meditation is something that I just started, and I try to do 5 minutes a day, and I feel like some of the best days I've had on planet Earth are the days I don't look at my cell phone or I forget my cell phone or whatever, and this concept called Vipassana, whatever, is you go and there's no cell phones and you
Right.
meditate and you don't talk to anybody, and it's more with getting to know yourself, correct? And
Correct.
it's something that's, like, very I believe, and I don't know if you guys have done this, but, like, healthy for you, and I feel like that's something on my list in life where I'm like, "Man, that'd be a huge accomplishment for me personally to be able to do something like that." So that's definitely on the list. And then I would say that I've always wanted to go to see the Egyptian pyramids. I think that I'm very attracted to Egyptian culture and all of that. And I think that would be wonderful to see. So that's definitely on the bucket list. I'll give you one more. I would say for me, like an adventure that I have not done that I would like to do would be yeah, I don't I to be honest with you, like, I just really I would say, like, a bigger bucket list would be to travel more, but to travel more in a way where I can connect with locals on a deeper level, because a lot of the traveling that I've done, and I'm very grateful for it, but it's more so like you go to hotels and you, like, do the tours and all that, which is great, but, like, for me, I feel like I love talking to people, and I love asking questions, and if the tables were switched, I would probably be annoying you guys with a bunch of questions, but I just love connecting with people, so I feel like my bucket list would be to travel more and to connect with more local people in more cultures that I don't know anything about.
This is an easy one. So
Okay.
favorite Indian food.
Oh god, I'm gonna probably offend some people that don't eat meat. I'll give you, like okay, so if we're talking meat dishes, chicken biryani for sure, and I like a side of aloo gobi.
Spicy.
No, I can't do the spice, man.
And
I like it's funny because, like, Herschel's Gujarati, and I love Gujarati food. However, some of it has a lot of sugar and stuff like that, so sometimes it's a little too sweet for me, but I put everything all in one thing, and Herschel looks at me like I have 10 heads. He's, "What are you doing? That's not how you're supposed to eat this." So I really like the Gujarati food, and yeah, I would say chicken biryani or a lot of the Gujarati food for sure. At least that's what I have the most experience with. Yeah, I will say, guys, I don't have stomachs like my when I have, like, a lot of the paneer, it's so beautiful, it's so good, but, like, when I have a lot of that day after day, it's just my stomach I get very bloated. I feel very heavy. I and the spice can add up for sure. Yeah, I try to keep it, like, very light and not as too much spicy, but it's interesting. I do like meat, obviously, and I would say that I don't eat as much obviously, as much meat in India, but I had do you guys eat meat by chance?
nope.
I'm vegan.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you probably don't but there's been a couple other meat dishes that are really good, but
Yeah.
and then obviously a good dosa, you can't go wrong with a good dosa. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's the food.
In fact, I would recommend next time you're in Delhi and you should meet up with Rahul and you both
Yeah,
should go to
thanks.
this place called Bukhara. It's a restaurant at the ITC Moria and it's got one of the best dal Bukhara. So dal Bukhara is a black lentil dal. I had it. So the last time I was there about 18 years ago, but it's still fresh in my mind. That's how good that dal is.
That good?
It is that good. So I would definitely
Oh,
recommend you guys have dinner.
what do you dip that in?
You would have that with a naan or a roti.
Just naan, okay, a
Yeah,
roti, okay, got it.
yeah.
Right,
But
exactly.
it is. I'll send you a link on
It's got a very
LinkedIn to
unique
that
taste.
restaurant.
Got a very
Yeah.
unique taste, and
I,
you
I
should
think they
definitely.
cook
I
it over 2 days. It takes at least 24 hours on to just to cook it. So
really?
it's that intense of a dish.
Yeah, the vegetable there's so many wonderful vegetable dishes. Yeah, there's so many. I just love meat, so the biryanis are good. I heard the best biryani in all of India is in Hyderabad. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is accurate.
Why is that?
It's the Nizams of Hyderabad. So they were the ones who came up with the whole dum biryani concept, right? Where it is the rice is cooked alongside the meat in a container which is sealed. So that's a very different approach towards
No,
cooking
actually,
biryani. And there are
Amit,
layers of, yeah,
actually,
good.
Hyderabadi dum biryani is different, and there is Lucknow that is different. If you're
Really?
talking about non-veg food, so there are two
Yeah,
aspects to it. One is the Hyderabadi aspect, which of course includes biryani also. But then there is Lucknow. In UP, there's a place called Lucknow. So
right.
Lucknow is very famous. So there was, these are all Islamic cultures, and this is primarily Mughal food. Yeah,
Exactly.
Mughal era food. So it spread out to both the places. And this is the Lucknow thing is different from what is Hyderabad. Both are dum, both are cooked in a different way, but tastes are very different, as people say. They're vegetarian, non-vegetarian, both kind of
Wow.
dishes. So you should visit
Wow.
Lucknow also once if you've not.
Yeah, I will. I did say
It's very near
yeah,
to
there's a
Varanasi. If you want to go to
yeah,
Varanasi,
yeah, yeah. There's a couple schools there, colleges there for sure, yeah. Wait, so who's vegan? You're vegan?
I'm
Amit is
vegan.
vegan.
I'm vegan.
Wow, so that must be tough to be vegan when you go back to India. That must be tough to be vegan in India.
It is tough, especially I did not grow up vegan. I became a vegan in the last 3 years. So during the
Oh,
pandemic,
congratulations.
and I reevaluated my priorities and some decisions. And one of them was, of course, to go off animal products completely. But yes, it is a struggle to be in India
Yeah,
and be a vegan. Yes, there are days when you accidentally have to cheat because there's so much of options there. So I wouldn't say I'm 100% vegan right now. I would probably be at a 99%. There are days when you end up having a paneer or a sweet dish which has
right.
some milk or dairy products in it. But
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. But yeah,
Brendan,
cool.
our final question: what is your favorite Indian word that you listen to and it makes you smile?
Word or song?
A word.
Word.
A word? Oh god. A word? I would
Anything in your vocabulary that keeps popping up in your mouth.
It's funny because I feel like when I'm in India, I hear more of the words. I think there's namaste is cool because you're greeting people. I love talking to people, and I think that's an easy one. I know, guys. I don't know. I
Okay,
don't
it's
know
good.
what word pops up consistently.
We'll
Yeah, no, I can't
question
answer.
to your favorite Hindi song or Indian song.
Oh,
It doesn't have to
jeez.
be, but which is that song that gets you on the dance floor?
The song that is talking about wearing your black sunglasses.
Kala Chashma?
Kala just
Yes. Yeah.
Tenu Kala Chashma
Yeah.
Jachta Hai.
I like that. Yeah, that song's phenomenal. I also really listen Chenya, Chenya, you know that song?
Shahrukh.
You're talking about
No,
Chal Chaya Chaya.
no, it's this one.
That's Shah Rukh Khan.
Yes, I-
Yeah, that song is amazing. I like that one. I also like really interesting. I'll give you something that most people don't know when I work, but I love sourcing, which means that we invest in 99% of the deals that we do. Or excuse me, we source 99% of the deals that we do. And a lot of the sourcing comes from LinkedIn. And I listen to what is like the guitar? It's like it starts with an S. Like it's
Sitar.
this very
Sitar.
yes. Oh my god, man. I There's like videos on that on YouTube that are like 10 hours long, and that's like a meditation for me. So I'm like listening to that. I'm currently sourcing, and I'm like looking like I'm reaching out, like I'm in the zone. And that type of music is just very, I think it, like, relaxes me, and it puts me in this, like, very calm state where I can be productive, and I'm not overstimulated, and I'm not too tired, like, I don't know. Do you guys listen to that ever or no? Or am I, like, the
Yes.
only one that does that?
No, we do.
there are places we go to where it keeps playing in the background. So that's always a background music of song.
So there was Pandit Ravi Shankar, who was one of the most famous sitar players of India.
Really?
If you have not heard him, then
Yeah.
he's at a different level altogether. So
Really?
yes, so he was one of the most celebrated sitar players of India. He's no more with us anymore, but
Wow.
he's definitely one of the best. In fact, if you listen to him play, you could get goosebumps. He's that good.
Wow.
And there is his daughter also now who plays.
Anushka
Oh,
Shankar.
wow. Yeah, I just find that very beautiful.
These things change with the as you grow up because when we were little kids and when this sitar vadan used to come in the TV, we used to switch it off.
Really,
As kids, it is difficult to digest.
I
I think
understood.
there's one other artist who's a friend of my sister. His name is Chirag Katti. He is also considered as one of the most promising. I've seen him play. I'll send you his YouTube, but he's also pretty cool. Chirag.
So you saw him play live?
Yes. So
Oh,
he's
wow.
a pretty cool artist. I'm gonna send you his
Wow.
link as well. All right.
Yeah, man. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much, guys. This was an absolute pleasure, absolute blast. Thank you so much for having me.
So
Same
thank you
here,
so
same.
much, Brendan. I think this was both informational. There's a lot of knowledge that you shared with us, and it was also fun at the same time that
Yeah.
we've met you and spoken to you. It feels like we're speaking to a friend, and it's a fun Zoom call. So thank you so much for being this humble and giving us all this time in spite of all your active commitments. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Super grateful. I really appreciate it.
Right. And
Thank you.
finally, on behalf of the community, I would like to say namaste to you because that's also one of your favorite words.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Nice.